So tonight we come to the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel. Um, Daniel takes place about 8 years before Ezekiel was carried into captivity by King Nebuchadnezzar. So it's about 8 years before Ezekiel. Daniel was taken from Jerusalem to Babylon by the same king, obviously King Nebuchadnezzar. He was young, intelligent, he was skillful in wisdom. Daniel is one of the few men in Scripture of whom God says only good things. He only says good things. 3 times he is referred to as greatly beloved. Greatly beloved. He was taken captive, and with him there were 3 other Hebrew boys. You know their Babylonian names. What are they? Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. That's correct. Their Hebrew names, however, were Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. And so they had Hebrew names to go with their other ones. So Daniel's Babylonian name, anybody know what his Babylonian name was? Belteshazzar. Belteshazzar, yes. Not to be confused with Belshazzar, the king, but Belteshazzar. The name Daniel means God is my judge. God is my judge. There were some contemporary prophets with Daniel. They were Ezekiel, Habakkuk, Jeremiah, and Zephaniah. And so there were some guys all there together: Ezekiel, Daniel, Habakkuk, Jeremiah, and Zephaniah. The date of Daniel is around 530 BC, and the theme of the book is the sovereignty of God, a reminder to us of how God is in control of every situation and circumstance, and he's always working for his glory to accomplish his purpose and working for our good. The memory verse that we're going to use is chapter 4 and verse 17, the last part of that verse, which reads that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows on it whom he wishes and sets over it the lowliest of men. A secondary theme, if you will, is one very similar to Ezekiel, and that is, they will know that I am Jehovah. Again and again, God says they will know that I am Jehovah. Let's look at the structure of the book, how the book is broken down, and we're just going to break it into 2 sections. And chapters 1 to 6 are historical. Chapters 1 to 6 are historical. They give us a historical account as God reveals his plan and purpose to Daniel for the immediate future. These were events that actually occurred in the life of Daniel, also in the life of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But they still have a future element to them, a future fulfillment to them. For example, in chapter 3, we read about the 3 Hebrew boys being thrown into the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But it represents the fiery furnace of tribulation that Israel will go through later on. And so you'll see these comparisons. You'll see historical events take place, but yet they have a reference to fulfillment sometime in the future. Chapters 7 through 12 are prophetic. These chapters are prophetic. They deal with future events, not only future events in the near future of Israel and Jerusalem, but also in the far fulfillment when Jesus comes and reigns at the end of time. So they deal with future events, including the end of time. I mentioned last week that most people, when they study the book of Daniel, they study the first 6 chapters. Those are historical. Those are the ones that we're familiar with. Daniel and the writing on the wall in chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown into the fiery furnace, Daniel thrown into the lion's den. We're familiar with all those historical events, but people usually stop at chapter 7 and they don't consider the prophecy that even relates to us pertaining to the end of time. Now, when you look at the book of Daniel, it's also wise to look at the book of Revelation. Neither book can be fully understood without the other. So you have to look at Revelation, you have to look at Daniel. If you want to understand Revelation, read Daniel. If you want to understand Daniel, read Revelation. It will bring them into picture. And there are striking similarities. For example, both Daniel and John were greatly loved by the Lord. Daniel is called the one greatly loved by the Lord. John was called what? The disciple whom Jesus loved. And so they were both greatly loved by the Lord. Both men saw visions while they were in exile. Daniel saw his vision while in exile in Babylon. John saw his vision while he was in exile where? Patmos, the island of Patmos. The Revelation is a prophecy. It's mentioned some 5 times, and Daniel was a prophet. Jesus called him such. So much of what is sealed in Daniel, we'll see some of that in just a minute. A lot of what we see sealed in the book of Daniel is unsealed in the book of Revelation. For example, let's do this real quickly. Take your Bible and turn to Daniel 12. Daniel 12. And let's look at verses 8 and 9. Daniel 12, verse 8. As for me, Daniel says, I heard but could not understand. So I said, my Lord, what will be the outcome of these events? This is right after the Lord had told him that these things would be for a time, times, and half a time. That's 2.5 years, by the way he refers to it. Verse 9, he said, go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed and sealed up until the end of time. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand. But those who have insight will understand. He said, these things are sealed up for what? For the end of time. Till the end of time. Now, turn to Revelation 5. Revelation 5. This is where the Lamb takes the scroll, which is the title deed to the earth. Oh, only Christ can do that. He's the only one worthy to open the book and break the seals. And then in verse 5, one of the elders said to me, John says, stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals. So what Daniel has received and is concealed, now in Revelation 5, we see that it is revealed. It is opened. It is unveiled so that we can have understanding. Now, I want to refer you to the chart that I gave you. It's on the second sheet that I gave you so that you can see this. And I'm not going to take time to go through the whole thing because it's a good study for you to catch up with. But you make the comparison in the book of Daniel. You remember Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And in that dream, he saw this great tree, and all the animals and all the people came to the tree, and they were there. He had this dream of a great image. This is chapter 2. And then Daniel has a vision in chapter 7, and he sees 4 beasts. Nebuchadnezzar sees this statue that was before him. It had a head, it had breasts and arms, it had belly and thighs, it had legs and feet. Daniel's vision was the same. He saw the head, the breasts and the arms, the belly and the thighs, the legs and the feet. And you see the comparison there. Nebuchadnezzar's head was gold, the breast was silver, the feet or the belly was brass, and the legs and feet were iron. Each of those metals, if you will, are softer and more brittle as time goes on, as they go down through the list. And then Daniel saw his vision, the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the beast. So you see the comparisons there. And when you look at Daniel's vision in chapter 7, you see the head. He says, this is the kingdom of Babylon. This is the current kingdom. This is where Nebuchadnezzar was. And then in verse 5, he sees the breast and the arms, the bear. This was the next kingdom, which was the Medo-Persian kingdom, the kingdom of the Medes and Persia. And so the third one was the leopard, and that is the kingdom of Greece. And then the final beast in verse 7 of chapter 7 is the Roman Empire, the Roman kingdom. And so you see, as you study that chart, you'll see how they all come together, how they fit. But as you get down toward the bottom, you see the stone in chapter 2, verses 34 and 35. You see this stone cut out, not made of hands. And then Daniel's correspondence to that is the little horn, who was the Ancient of Days. This is God himself. This is a picture of Christ, who is the eternal King. He is the stone that stands and will not be broken. He is the mountain of verse 35, the mountain that stands forever, the everlasting kingdom, relating all the way to the end to the millennial kingdom of Christ. So it's a great study, great look, and I hope you'll take some time to make those comparisons verse by verse. The four kingdoms represented by the great image and by the four beasts were literal kingdoms, and they were followed by the stone. You remember Isaiah prophesied about the stone which the builders rejected, but that is Christ himself, and it is his everlasting kingdom. That's the millennial kingdom that we look forward to when Christ comes again. All right, let's look at some choice selections real quick, just a brief study. Look at chapter 1 and verse 8, where we see Daniel's resolve. Daniel's resolve. In verse 8, Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or with the wine which he drank. You understand that when the Babylonians captured the Jewish people and brought them into captivity in Babylon, they took some of the sons of royalty, sons of the hierarchy families, and Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, among others, were taken captive. And what they wanted to do was brainwash them. They wanted to eliminate everything Jewish in their minds. They wanted them to worship the gods of Babylon. They wanted them to eat the foods of Babylon. They wanted to do the things of Babylon. And Daniel resolved in his mind, no, I'm not going to do that. And you're familiar with the story. The one who was charged with taking care of Daniel, Daniel said, just give me, give me the food, not your food, my food. Just give me the good food, the vegetables to eat and water to drink. Just let me live on vegetables and water. And then check on me and see how we're doing. And so Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego lived on the vegetables and the water. And after a certain period of time, they were in much better health than all the rest of the boys that they had taken. So his resolve was to remain pure and true before the Lord. Let's skip ahead to chapter 2 and verses 44 and 45, where we see the vision of the divided kingdom that Nebuchadnezzar sees. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, And that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put to an end all the kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever. This is the millennial kingdom. This is the kingdom of Christ. This is the stone which the builders rejected, and it will never be replaced. Another feature as we go on to chapter 3 is the resolve of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I love their story. And they too refused to bow to the king, bow to the idol. They refused to bend their knee, if you will. And Nebuchadnezzar said, look, I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace. And what God is there that's going to save you then? And here is their response in verse 16. O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. If we face persecution, if we face trials of this sort, when we are asked to bow down to the gods of this world, there comes a time when we're going to have the resolve to say, we're not going to do it. And God, we're trusting, will deliver us. But if, according to his divine sovereign purposes, it is not his will to deliver us, but his will for us to suffer and die for his glory and sake, still we're not going to bow. This is the resolve. I think this goes back, a modern example is back during the COVID era. And there were several churches, most notable of which was Grace Community Church in California, who refused to close. They refused to bow because they said Christ is Lord of the church, not the government. And so they felt that the government had overstepped their bounds. And so they said, we will not bow. And so there comes that resolve for us too. Whatever we face, Satan may hit us with all sorts of trials, all sorts of tribulations, and he may get us to try to bow or to reject Christ. But we say, no, we believe God will deliver us. But even if he chooses not to, and somebody says, well, I'll kill you. Well, that just takes us home. What's the big deal? As Jake Hess used to sing, death ain't no big deal. So we're ready to go. We have the resolve to stand firm. Chapter 5 gives us the feast of Belshazzar. This is where the king sees the handwriting on the wall. You remember? Mene, tekel, upharsin, which means to number, to weigh, and to be found lacking. And that's what he was saying of King Belshazzar. You have been weighed in the balances of God. You have been found lacking, and your kingdom will come to an end. Chapter 6 is Daniel in the lion's den. Chapter 7 is the vision of judgment. Let's look at that real quick. Chapter 7 and verse 9. He says, I kept looking until there were set up, thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. This is a picture of Christ coming in his millennial kingdom to reign forever. His vesture was like white snow. His hair of his head was pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Wheels were burning fire. The river of fire was flowing and coming out from him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat and the books were opened. This is the final judgment, pointing to the final judgment, the great white throne judgment, where those who have rejected Christ will be finally judged and cast away for eternity. And then chapter 12 and verse 3 gives us a promise that as we are faithful and witnessing for the Lord, there is a reward. for being faithful. Chapter 12 and verse 3. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the heavens, the expanse of heaven, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forevermore. This is our joy and our duty to shine as stars in the light, in the darkness, rather, as Paul says in Philippians chapter 2. It is our joy to shine for the Lord Jesus Christ in righteousness and lead many to righteousness so that the kingdom will advance, so the kingdom will grow. Daniel's a wonderful book, and I hope you enjoy time reading it and comparing the visions that are given there. Look down. I've given you some things to look for, but look at the last one there where it talks about the signs of the end times. See if some of these things don't sound familiar. It says, many will run to and fro. Knowledge will increase. That's chapter 12, verse 4. The idea of people running to and fro is that they are searching for answers to the devastation that was found in Daniel's book. They were looking for answers, and people, I think, today are looking for answers. They're running to and fro, and knowledge is increasing. We see that taking place. Chapter 12 and verse 7, when the power of the holy people is scattered, everything will be finished. For a time, times, and half time. These events will be completed, he says. And then verse 10, the wicked won't understand, but the wise will understand. Many will be purged, purified, and refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. As we read the book of Daniel, as we read the book of Revelation, as we read the book of the prophets, the books of the prophets, we will gain understanding. And as these events start to unfold, these events of the end times, we will have understanding, we will have knowledge, we will be aware, and we will be prepared. That's our goal, that's our duty, and that's our joy as we read the Word. So I hope you enjoy looking through Daniel, and I hope it encourages you in these trying times that I am sure many think these are the last days. These are the last times. We've been in the last days since the Lord ascended. We know that. But we're seeing all this stuff increase and take place, and we know that the Lord's time must be very soon. So we need to be ready.